guys, welcome back to Room 237, and with this video I am finally concluding my reviews of not the entire series, because there's still one more film, but at least the original trilogy of Adam Green's Hatchet films. So I've already done reviews for Hatchet 1 and 2, so check those out. And this is for the third installment, Hatchet 3, which I think originally it was intended to be a trilogy. Of course, we got the fourth film, Victor Crowley, in 2017, 4 years after this one. I still have not seen Victor Crowley. I do not own it. I've heard very mixed things, complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Some say it's the worst, some say it's the best, as far as sequels go. But just as a recap, I think this is a modern day classic, cult classic. This is everything I love about these Renaissance slashers, bringing the 70s and 80s slashers to the present day. Doesn't look like one, but it takes everything we love about those films and is a complete celebration of those things. Always been a big fan of Hatchet. 2, I was never the biggest fan on. I've grown to appreciate it more, but I still ended up doing a rant on it. It's kind of a mild rant. I think the humor was a little too amped up. The effects were, although still practical, a little cartoony. And I hated the look of Crowley in this one. And I wasn't really the biggest fan of giving more lore to Victor Crowley. I mean, it works out for the story, but, like I said in that review, I much prefer just like the campfire urban legend story of this film. So before I get into my opinions on this, this is the only one of not just the original trilogy, but all 4 films not to be directed by Adam Green. Although he still served as, it says Adam Green presents, so he's still the presenter. I think he served as a producer, still served as writer, and had full creative control, and chose final cut of the film. But he did not direct it. This is the only one of the 4 he did not direct. Instead, he handpicked the director, B.J. McDonnell, who was the Steadicam operator on the first 2 films. But other than that, it's very similar to 2. It was a case of sort of getting the band back together. Again, Adam Green did write. This produced by Adam Green and Sarah Albert. She served as producer on the first 2. Will Barrett returned as a cinematographer, and Marks as editor. We do have a new music composer, Scott Glasgow, who, just to see what else he's done, TV shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Captain America's a Civil War, Wrong Turn. He did do the original Wrong Turn. They, which I remember being an awful film. Spider-Man 2, The Grudge. Let's see. He's done quite a bit. Hatchet 3. Since then, not much that I recognize. But anyway, and again, put out by Dark Sky Films and Aeroscope Pictures. It doesn't say what the budget was, but it does look like a bigger budget than the second film. Like I said, this still has a very direct-to-video type look and feel to it. This one really goes back to basics. This one has some humor, but it feels a lot darker. It does feel more serious. Does have a little bit more action. Not much, but because you do have the SWAT team involved. The look of Crowley is a much big improvement. Even Kane Hodder himself said that was his favorite look for the character. To him, it looked more evil and scary. Excuse me, I agree, especially over part 2. And was released in 2013. Now, thing about this film is this is the only Hatchet sequel that I actually anticipated. I mean, I saw Hatchet 1 when it first came out, not knowing a thing about it, other than seeing a trailer. 2 was already out by the time I realized that it was a thing. And I had not really followed any kind of horror news or upcoming movie news around the time this came out. But by the time this was greenlit in 2011, I was looking into horror news. I remember when this was announced. I remember when, you know, they were adding people to the cast, like Derek Mears, of course, Chameleon, Hills Have Eyes 2, Jason, Friday the 13th remake, reboot. So we have Jason against Jason in this movie. That is awesome. Derek Mears is one of my favorite Jasons too, by the way. He's, and not just a big, intimidating stuntman. He's actually a fairly good actor. He played his, you know, SWAT commander character pretty well in this. I remember when the stills were released, the teaser, which was actually just the scene of the SWAT team going up to the house, and you just kind of make out the shape of Crowley in the darkness of the open door, and he just like pulls the SWAT, a couple SWAT members, like drags them into the house. Then there was, of course, the scene with the balls hanging from a tree, and the guy being like, "Those are someone's balls hanging from a tree. Balls do not hang from trees." One guy pukes. He's like, "That guy knows what's up." But getting to the cast, Danielle Harris returns as Mary Beth Dunstan. Kane Hodder, of course, returns as Victor Crowley. And Perry Shen, who played Sean and Justin in the first 2 films as brothers, he returns, but again as a different character. Those are really the only 3 returning actors, with Hodder and Shen being the only ones to be in all 3, and I believe they're also both in part 4 for Victor Crowley, because I think it is more of a standalone film. But we also have, like I said, Derek Mears, Riley Vanderbilt, who played young Victor Crowley and was still Adam Green's wife by the time this came out. She plays a SWAT team member as well. We got Robert Diago Dokui, Cody Blue Snyder. And as far as the, who does Cody Blue Snyder play? Okay, Schneiderman, the guy's like, "Those are balls hanging from a tree." He actually played young Samson Dunstan, the young Robert Englund character in part 2. Now, as far as all the horror genre actors, favorites, familiar faces that appear in this, we have Caroline Williams, Stretch from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That's awesome. Amongst a number of other films, but I always remember her as Stretch. In fact, wasn't she in... Trying to think. There's something else I know her from, and I'm gonna feel stupid when I look at... Oh, she was in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Leprechaun 3, Stepfather 2. Okay, that's what I remember her from, probably. Yeah, Chainsaw Massacre 2. I know I probably should have done this before, but... okay. Oh, also, she was also in both In Search of Darkness documentaries, and this movie, Veronica, which I have seen, but it was, I don't remember much of it. But anyway, Sean Whalen plays the EMT Randy. He was Roach in People Under the Stairs. He was also the paperboy in Batman Returns. And, of course, Sid Haig, the great Sid Haig, may he rest in peace, Captain Spaulding. Kind of playing a similar character, like the lovable, un-PC asshole. He plays that kind of character. And Zach Galligan, uh, a Billy from Gremlins. He's the one that plays the sheriff. Now, well, all right. I was going to start off with the story, but I guess I'll get into my thoughts. I do enjoy this film. I think the first time I saw it, it was so hyped because I waited like 2 years for it to come out. And I wasn't the biggest fan of this, but I was like, okay, how's it going to end? I want to see how it wraps up. So I was actually very excited for this. And with each next step in its release, like it's the stills, the poster, the trailer, I got more and more excited. So I think the first time there was just more hype, like my own hype. And I thought, it's a fair ending. But for some reason, I remember kind of being underwhelmed. I've seen it a couple of times since, and every time I watch it, I do enjoy it more. I feel like it doesn't try to be like the next, well, similar to what I said about this film, like what you would expect with a slasher sequel, like an 80s slasher sequel. Up the body count, up the gore, add a little bit more to the killer as far as backstory or what makes him tick. They did do all that. But, again, a lot of humor, much lighter tone, very goofy look for Crowley. One thing I forgot to mention, other than his goofy look, was his hair was dry and very frizzy, almost kind of fro-y looking, which made him look really silly. Here, though, I mean, he's got, like, long, black, always wet hair that really makes him... It's a much darker look, and it's a much darker film. Like I said, it does have some humor. It much lighter, though. In fact, it even opened... It does pick up immediately with this one, with Mary Beth shooting him in the face. She walks off. He comes back to attack her. I think she shoots him and he falls down or something, but he lands on that giant-ass chainsaw from that film. Cuts him in half. She takes his scalp. Goes to the sheriff's office, covered in blood, shotgun, scalp. They arrest her. But when she gets there, we see Adam Green's character from the first film getting arrested. And he's like, I should have gone on the swamp tour. And then one other kind of funny nod was when Mary Beth is in jail, Zach Galligan, the sheriff, goes to talk to her. And he pretty much recaps the first two films. Like saying, that's your story, that's what you're going to go with. He says, that has got to be the dumbest story and the most contrived, whatever. And then it just shows Adam Green in his cell, like, because he's the one that wrote. It was kind of a funny, I guess you could call it a meta, but nod. But basically, they send EMTs out to recover all the bodies, and a whole new massacre starts. And then, SWAT team comes in, and that's basically the movie. Caroline Williams plays the sheriff's ex-wife, who's a Victor Crowley expert enthusiast, kind of treated like a crazy a Bigfoot hunter. She knows everything about Crowley. She knows everything about Mary Beth. She knows how to stop him. And I will say, each addition they add to Victor Crowley's lore, like, okay, where he came from, how, not just how he was born, but how the curse can be ended, and on his end, on Victor's end, which is he gets revenge on the three teenagers, how the curse can be lifted on someone else's end, which is, the last living relative of the three teenagers has to give Victor his daddy, which he's been cremated in ashes. So eventually it's Caroline Williams, the deputy, and her going to retrieve the ashes from, I guess his cousin. I guess Thomas Crowley was Sid Haig's great uncle. He has the ashes. Get the ashes from him, and then get it to Crowley. But that's going on simultaneously with all these EMTs showing up. And then, like, the local sheriff's department shows up, and then the SWAT team shows up. And it's basically a massacre. And it does have a very large body count, but a lot of them are actually off-screen. It's like a lot of this happens while we're focusing on, like, Caroline Williams and Mary Beth. And then later on, when we get back to the Crowley house with the SWAT team, we see the aftermath. But, of course, the belt sander comes back. The belt sander, I think, other than the hatchet, is the one weapon that kind of runs through the whole series. As far as the effects go, which I don't think was done. No, it was not done by John Carl Buechler. It was done by Robert Pendergraph in Aunt Dolly's Garage. A lot of, like, the gore and the viscera has kind of the cartoony look of this one. Like when you see someone's brain fall out or there's guts or something. But the blood, other than, like, if the blood is, like, spraying and misting like it did in the first film, like, if it's just pooling, it has this very thick orange, almost kind of soupy, pasty look to it. Kind of like a spaghetti sauce, almost. Actually, it looks more like SpaghettiO sauce, but, like, just this very orange, saucy look to it. I don't know if that's what they were going for. I still think this one has the best look of the blood, the effects. Some of the kills are kind of derivative. I mean, we see this one deputy. He's held down on the ground. His arms get ripped off, which is kind of like the death of Marcus in the first film. But then taking a step forward where Crowley just steps on his head, pushes it down into the mud. You get a death with a defibrillator because he's brought onto the EMT pontoon boat. Defibrillator, like, fries, but then he goes like that, head explodes. Derek Mears actually kind of gets like a Sub-Zero type fatality. He shoves his... Crowley shoves his hand into his stomach, grabs a hold of his spine, and I like how they have him kind of going like this, because he pulls out, like, his spine and his skull, so it's kind of like a Sub-Zero type fatality. But I really did like Derek Mears' character. I thought he played the part very well. And it was really great to see these two Jasons on screen, especially since Mears gets to call, he calls Crowley, like, he says something like, do it or do your best or something, but he ends it with, you little bitch. New Jason gets to call classic Jason a bitch. That is awesome. And, I mean, I think Kane Hodder was actually an idol of Derek Mears, because I know they were both, certainly Mears, I want to say Hodder was, but, a bullied in school. Mears had some birth defects, his hair and everything. He identified with characters like Jason. He grew up to play him, and now he's a large, intimidating human being. But I think of all the kind of nods, especially through dialogue, I think new Jason calling classic Jason a bitch right before he gets killed is one of the most... It is fan servicey, but done in, like, the best way. I guess I'll get into spoilers here, but yeah, we really just kind of do see the EMTs, the sheriff's department, and the SWAT team get picked off. I mean, after a big group of them are killed off on screen, we do kind of see them get killed off one by one. Also, before I get to spoilers, I do want to say, I'm not sure if it was filmed in the same area as the first two. I think it was all filmed on the same ranch. But, if so, yeah, it doesn't say it. Is the production designer still... Does not say. The swamp is back to looking like a swamp. You know, it has some atmosphere to it. Again, not as strong as this one. But, you know, you really get the feeling you're way out deep in the woods, bayou swamp. This still has kind of like the direct-to-video. They just went out in the woods somewhere, happened to be by water. This really does have more a similar look and feel, rich atmosphere, similar to the first one. And again, the tone is much darker. The look of Crowley is much better. But I guess I'll get into spoilers here for those that want to go through the series. The next step in unearthing the next, bit of how to stop Crowley. Oh, I already said that. The part about the ashes. So the you gotta be fucking kidding me part in this is actually Will Barrett, the cinematographer. He plays a EMT that's just kind of running around aimlessly. He goes to hide by a boat, and Ben, Joel David Murray from the first film, he reaches out and grabs him. He's like, dripping blood. Crowley shows up, throws a hatchet, hits him in the head. He's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And then he dies. I actually thought that one was kind of funnier than Tony Todd's in the second film. Perry Shen actually lives through this film. I actually thought that was a nice touch. We see him playing the two brothers in the first two. He gets killed. But he actually makes it in this one. And Roach, from People Under the Stairs, he's actually talking about some of the bodies. And he's like, found this one guy that was decapitated. He got his leg cut off below the knee. Kind of looked like you. Which was Sean from the first film. And he's like, oh, I get it. What? Because all us Asians look alike, right? He's like, come on, man, no. And he actually repeats a line that Sean said with the same inflection from the first film. He's like, oh, all Asians look alike. It's hilarious. Yeah. Says it the same way. I thought that was funny, too. So, it has its callbacks. I think some people might find that annoying. I find the character Vernon in this annoying. I can live with callbacks, being self-referential. Hell, most slashers after 85 were all self-referential anyway. Caroline Williams, she gets killed by, her head pulled right off. I will say when Zach Galligan gets killed, because Crowley spends a lot of time using the belt sander to get through this door on the boat that him, Riley Vanderbilt's character, and Perry Shen are hiding in the boat. He hears Caroline Williams coming with, the deputy and Mary Beth. So he sticks his head out. Crowley grabs him, and we don't see it, but we know he's being killed. But when they pull him back in, the effect doesn't look good until he falls on his back and we see his neck kind of goes up to here. Because at first it's like this very thin neck with like a very jagged kind of like flower sprouty kind of, I don't know, it's kind of looked weird, I guess. The Inventor Crowley's actual death kind of reminded me of Jason Goes to Hell. I don't know what they were going for, but he he grabs Mary Beth at the very end, smashes her against a tree. She's impaled by a branch, and she takes the urn of ashes and smashes it on his head, and he just starts to melt. Great effects. Now, it reminded me of when the sheriff was melting in Jason Goes to Hell. And I like the part where she's sitting there, blood's coming out of her mouth. She grabs her rifle, and she's like, get up, do it. And he's just a melted pile of just mush and gunk and bones. And the music's all epic. Then she just goes, fuck it. And yeah, when she pulls the trigger and he explodes, it is some CGI, which is fine. He did have a blue flame in him, which I thought was cool, I guess to signify, the curse has been lifted. It was like a magical kill or something. Sadly, I think this was one of... Oh, no. I was going to say, I think this was one of Sid Haig's last roles, but... Because I was thinking of Victor Crowley, which came out in 2017. Of course, he would do 3 from Hell. But he was just as funny in this as he is in Rob Zombie's films. Maybe kicked up a little bit, kind of a cartoon. But Sid Haig is always funny. But yeah, in some ways, it's a lot like the earlier Hatchet films, just a new batch of people going into a swamp. Though I do love the shot. They finally do burn down the Crowley house, which they tore down and rebuilt for every film. Because there is one really goofy death where Crowley, the SWAT team and the sheriff's department has, crowded around his house. He's doing the thing where he, hooks and ropes some of the crew, pulls them into the house. He's outside. They're all, pounding on him with their rifles. Instead of shooting at him, hitting him, and then he kind of does this thing. They all fly off. But he's on the deck of his house, and he has this one guy. He's trying to force his head down onto, a jagged stump. And... Schneiderman, the young deputy, he's got a bazooka, but when he fires it, it hits the guy that Crowley is trying to kill, and it sends him back into the house, and Crowley still stands there. It's very cartoony. I get why they did it. I don't know if that's possible. Again, they're not going for realism in these films. But when that explodes, the house catches on fire. And I do love the shot of his house is on fire. Crowley kind of walks away like he's walking towards someone. The house explodes. And I just love that slow motion shot of him just kind of turning his head. It's all wavy from the heat. You got flames. Again, with the look of this makeup, with that shot, awesome. As far as his look, I still think this is the best. And again, having him in shadow for most of the time really works. I see a little bit of both the first and the second film in this one. But I see the best elements of the first and some of the worst elements of the second in this makeup. But overall, I think it's pretty well done. Definitely scarier than in part 2. But yeah, the tone, it does have some humor. It's definitely toned down a lot, especially since the previous film. It is going for a more darker feel. It does have more of a conclusiveness to it, although it does still kind of end the same way. And I don't know if Victor Crowley picks up the same way. But, where Mary Beth is laying there, her breathing stops. Cut to black, and then for a quick second, it shows her again as she takes a breath, and then cut to black again. But it does feel more like a conclusion, and it is getting a little bit more serious, which I appreciated, especially after the over-the-top goofiness of this film. I would say it doesn't have the best effects. Gore-wise, I mean, I thought the gore looked better in this one than in Hatchet 2. The blood, just a lot of it looked really thick and orange to me. That, of course, doesn't ruin the film. But also, I feel like Danielle Harris didn't really have a whole lot to do. I mean, she's either sitting in a jail cell, sitting in the back of the cop car, and she even fights going back to the swamp. Like, she's kind of over her revenge in this one. And even when she initially gives him the ashes, she's crying. She's like, I'm sorry for what my father did to you. But then, then she goes right back to screaming and trying to kill him. But, yeah, it feels like she really didn't have that much to do in this one. But, again, like the first two, it's great to see all these horror classic people like Caroline Williams, Zach Galligan, along with newer people like, well, Sid Haig's been around for a while, but as far as horror icons, Derek Mears. Definitely like this way more than the second film, but this one will always be my favorite. And even without seeing the fourth film as of right now, I would say this is a fitting conclusion. I mean, without having seen it, or if Victor Crowley had never been made and it just ended after this, I still think it works and acts as a fair conclusion. Now, I know how Victor Crowley comes to be in the fourth film. I know how he gets revived, which really makes me think it's like a new line of films, and that, this one does work as a closing chapter of a trilogy. But other than that, I'm not sure what else to say, so that is my series of reviews so far, at least for the original trilogy. I'm not sure when I'll get Victor Crowley. I'm hoping soon. But, again, as a recap, loved this film, always have. Just very, very fun. Everything I love about 80s slashers and modern slashers. Not so much a fan of this one. All the problems I had with it the first time are still there. A little too humorous. A little too cartoony. Hate the look of Victor Crowley. Gone back to being darker. A little less humor. But actually, the funnier parts in this are consistently funnier than in the second film. Actually, a lot like the first film. It definitely feels like there's... One thing I did forget to mention is that this one is much faster paced than the first two. Much better look for Crowley. The blood, I'm kind of iffy on, but the gore effects are better than in the second film. And I think this does work as a satisfactory and a fitting conclusion to this trilogy. Again, only acting as not seeing Victor Crowley as of yet, or if that had never been made. So that is the original three Hatchet films, and thank you for watching.